Welcome back to Face the Nation from the site of Super Bowl 53 here in Atlanta. We continue our conversation with President Trump, which took place Friday just before he was wheels up for his home in Palm Beach, Florida. What surprised you about some of the questions that Robert Mueller asked you?
Well, look, the Russia thing is a hoax. I have been tougher on Russia than any president, maybe ever, but than any president.
But when it comes to the investigation that the special counsel is conducting, I mean, 34 people have been charged here.
Excuse me. Okay, you ready? Okay, you ready? Of the 34 people, many of them were bloggers from Moscow, or they were people that had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with what they're talking about, or they were people that got caught telling a fib or telling a lie. I think it's a terrible thing that's happened to this country, because this investigation is a witch hunt. It's a terrible witch hunt, and it's a disgrace.
Do you think it should be made
public? When you look at
public?
General Flynn, where the FBI said he wasn't lying, but Robert Mueller said he was, and they took a man and destroyed his life. When you look at so many of the things that have happened, why didn't they go after Hillary Clinton for her emails? She had 33,000 emails that were deleted after receiving a subpoena from Congress.
And according to the special counsel, they were posted on WikiLeaks, and your friend Roger Stone was just indicted for his involvement.
First of all, Roger Stone didn't work on the campaign, except way at the beginning, long before we're talking about. Roger is somebody that I've always liked, but a lot of people liked Roger. Some people probably don't like Roger, but Roger Stone's somebody I've always liked. I mean, Roger's a character. But Roger was not, I don't know if you know this or not, Roger wasn't on my campaign, except way at the beginning.
Right.
So it's all, and yet you will ask me a question like that. Wasn't involved in my campaign.
Would you pardon him?
Have not thought about it. It looks like he's defending himself very well. But you have to get rid of the Russia witch hunt, because it is indeed. And remember this. There's been no president that has been tougher on Russia than Donald Trump.
Would you make the Mueller report public because you say there's nothing in there?
It's totally
Congress
up to the Attorney
subpoena
General.
it anyway, though.
Totally up to the Attorney General.
But what do you want them to do?
Even the Mueller report said it had nothing to do with the campaign. When you look at some of the people and the events, it had nothing to do.
You wouldn't have a problem if it became public.
Excuse me. No, it's up to the Attorney General. I don't know. It depends. I have no idea what it's going to say.
Okay.
So far, this thing's been a total witch hunt, and it doesn't implicate me in any way. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. There was no nothing. Doesn't implicate me in any way. But I think it's a disgrace.
What would make you use the U.S. military in Venezuela? What's the national
security? Well, I don't want to say
interest?
that, but certainly it's something that's on the. It's an option.
Would you personally negotiate with Nicolas Maduro to convince him to exit?
Well, he has requested a meeting, and I've turned it down because we're very far along in the process. You have a young and energetic gentleman, but you have other people within that same group that have been very, if you talk about democracy, it's really democracy in action.
When did he
We're going to
request
see
a
what
meeting?
happened. A number of months ago, he wanted to meet. I
But
thought it
now,
was
because
very
you're
far.
at that crisis
well,
point,
now
would you
we'll have to
negotiate
see.
that?
I would say this. I decided at the time, no, because so many really horrible things have been happening in Venezuela. When you look at that country, that was the wealthiest country of all in that part of the world, which is a very important part of the world. And now you look at the poverty, and you look at the anguish, and you look at the crime, and you look at all of the things happening. So I think the process is playing out very big, tremendous protests.
North Korea. When and where are you going to meet Kim Jong-un?
I won't tell you yet, but you'll be finding out probably State of the Union or shortly before. But the meeting is set. He's looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. We've made tremendous progress. If you remember, before I became president, it looked like we were going to war with North Korea. Now we have a very good relationship. The hostages are back. Okay? The remains are starting to come back. The remains of our Korean War veterans,
But
these
your
great
intelligence
people.
chief testified this week that Kim Jong-un is still very unlikely to give up his nuclear weapons program.
That's what the intelligence chief thinks. And I think
Why
there's
is he
a good
wrong?
possibility of that, too. But there's also a very good chance that we will make a deal. I think he's also tired of going through what he's going through. He has a chance to have North Korea be a tremendous economic behemoth. It has a chance to be one of the great economic countries in the world. He can't do that with nuclear weapons, and he can't do that on the path they're on now. I like him. I get along with him great. We have a fantastic chemistry. We have had tremendous correspondence that some people have seen and can't even believe it. They think it's historic, and we'll see what happens. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to make a deal, but certainly I think we have a very good chance of making a deal. And one of the reasons is because North Korea has a chance, being located between Russia, China, and South Korea. What a location. I'm in the real estate business. What a location. They have a chance to be an economic powerhouse.
You're going to keep U.S. troops there in South Korea?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about anything else. Maybe someday, I mean, who knows? But, you know, it's very expensive to keep troops there. You do know that. We have 40,000 troops in South Korea. It's very expensive, but I have no plans. I've never even discussed removing them.
I want to quickly get to China. The last time you spoke with Face the Nation, you were 100 days into office, and you said you would accept a less than perfect trade deal with China if it meant they'd be helpful with North Korea. Do you stand by that?
Well, yes, but I think we're in a different position now.
What do you mean?
We've put very massive tariffs on China. China's paying a big price, and it's hurt China's economy very badly. I want them to make a fair deal. They have been very helpful, especially at the beginning when I first came in with North Korea. They have stopped goods from going in. They have stopped a lot of things from going in through the border because, as you know, they have a border just like we have a border with Mexico, where crime is way up, by the way, way up, and you have to remember that. But we have a border with, they have a border with North Korea.
Right.
They have been very vigilant. Are they the same now? Probably a little bit less so. But North Korea is absolutely talking, and I think North Korea wants to make a deal. We are making a deal. It looks like we're doing very well with making a deal with China. I can tell you this, no two leaders of this country and China have ever been closer than I am with President Xi. We have a good chance to make a deal. I don't know that we're going to make one, but we have a good chance. And if it is a deal, it's going to be a real deal. It's not going to be a stopgap.
Sir, I hear your helicopters. I'm being told to wrap. I appreciate you being generous with your time.
Thank you very much, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're back with CBS News special correspondent James Brown. He's the host of the NFL Today. JB, you're so busy today. It is so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Margaret.
This is your 9th pregame show?
Mm-hmm. You know what? I try not to think about the numbers, although, as you and I were teasing before going on camera, when you hear the words venerable, legendary, translation old, and I never put it in context that what it meant. But I really try to focus on the event at hand. I thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing. It's new and different every time we are blessed
How
at
is
CBS
it different?
to do that.
How has the game changed over the years?
Wow, the game has changed. One, because of the amount of attention that it gets. It's a cultural phenomenon, if you will. It's the biggest one-day sporting event. Ratings, you're talking before 100 million people plus around the world. You look at the cost of what a commercial was back in 1967, I believe it was, at $42,000 for a 30-second spot. Try $5.5 million plus now for a 30-second spot. So that's how it's changed. And the coverage has been pretty comprehensive, but it's all fun.
So you got to give us the take here on this very controversial call with the no call in the Saints versus Rams game. Look, I can talk politics. You know the ins and outs of football. Explain to our audience about what is going to be done here to resolve this and exactly what happened.
First of all, it was absolutely an egregious no call. It was obviously pass interference. The receiver has the right to get the ball without being interfered by the defender, and it was missed. The officials, without getting too esoteric, had some other keys they had to read before turning to that play, and it happens that quickly in football. More to the question that you're asking, most people are looking for technology because it's so perfected now to answer all the questions. But that's a slippery slope. That no call was a judgment call, and right now the league does not allow replays for judgment calls because although that one was egregious, what happens if it's a minor violation but still a violation? Where do you draw the line? I think it's an unanswerable kind of situation, one that you have to live with, and that certainly comes from a number of officials as well.
But this is another controversy for the NFL. You heard President Trump, when we spoke with him, he's continued to bring some, frankly, unwanted attention to the NFL, particularly around this controversy over race, over how to handle standing or sitting during the anthem. Has the league moved past this?
I don't know that you can say the league has moved past it, because it's not an issue that can be moved past, in my humble opinion, as a correspondent, as a reporter. Because many of the athletes who feel so compelled to do such because of the systemic issues that are a real pathology in their communities, they just want to engage in a meaningful, collaborative approach to answering some of these things. On the Super Bowl pregame show today, we will talk with a very well-versed player. We'll also talk with a league official, senior official, and with a former CEO, Amy Trask, of a team to talk about what appears to be some significant progress that's been happening behind closed doors in very serious conversations, which quite frankly is the way it ought to happen.
Well, the president weighed in on that, and he tries to say it's been moved past in his dispute with Roger Goodell, but what you're talking about are those underlying issues that the protest was about in the first place.
So, you know, Margaret, and let me just say this, and again, I'm reporting again as a dispassionate source talking about this. The narrative has been that the players were being anti-patriotic, anti-flag, anti-police, anti-military. These are players who have family members who are in the military, who are law enforcement officers, and who are looking for a meaningful way to bring attention to something to create dialogue, which it has happened. But if the narrative has been hijacked to say that it is no matter what, it's a non-starter, you're not hearing. The two sides ought to hear each other to make progress.
An important point. You know, parents worry about their kids getting injured playing sports. That's been another topic for the NFL. How have they addressed some of these concerns about concussions and injuries?
Very serious issue, to say the least. One cannot run from that. Football is not playing chess. It's not playing Scrabble. It's a tough game. But what we have seen is, one, from last year to this year, there has been a significant drop, nearly 24% drop in concussions. That's significant, and prayerfully, hopefully, it'll continue going in that direction.
How'd they do that?
Well, a combination of things. Principally officiating. Roger Goodell probably gets a real bad rap because they called him as the new sheriff in town who's trying to clean up the game. That's a good thing. And the players recognize that as well, because when you see them, when they're no longer playing on the field and they're walking around showing the wounds sustained in that game, they need to be protected from themselves. Number two, guess who's going to make the decision about whether or not there's a pipeline of players coming up to play? Mothers like you. If a mother deems the game to be unsafe, you're not going to allow your newborn son to play football. At the lower levels, what the coaches are doing now, they're teaching what's called heads-up football, and it needs to start at that level, as opposed to attacking with the crown of your helmet. Hopefully I'm not getting too esoteric. You got to have your head up, and you got to wrap around. The game can still be played tough and physically without being dangerous, and cleaning up that element that maybe was playing in the old style football. Does that make sense, Margaret?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of parents appreciate you explaining all of that. What are you watching for in today's game? A lot of the talk is about the old guy versus the young kid. Is that the prime narrative that you are interested in? It's
a major narrative, but inside of that narrative is you've got a young coach on the side of the Los Angeles Rams, a genius, 33-year-old Sean McVay.
Genius.
Yes. Oh, he's very brilliant. But he's got seasoned coaches on the side of him, like the 60-plus-year-old Wade Phillips on the defensive side of the ball, who's been there.
I appreciate the word seasoned versus old. I like that.
I'm using it for myself as well, too, Margaret. And on the other side, you've got the master chess player in Bill Belichick. You've also got a 24-year-old quarterback with Jarrett Goff on the Rams. You got a 41-year-old Tom Brady. Margaret, there's a lot to be said for experience, and although these are the two best teams who are there, egregious non-call notwithstanding in terms of the New Orleans Saints, and I've got relatives down that way and they'll scream at me, the fact is the Super Bowl is a completely different game. Let's see who handles the nerves well. You can certainly count on the New England Patriots handling it well. We'll be watching for that. We'll be watching you, JB.
Yes, Thank you for making time. We'll be back in a moment with our panel of sports reporters. We're joined now by our panel of sports journalists. Jarrett Bell is an NFL columnist for USA Today Sports. Dana Jacobson is a co-host of CBS This Morning Saturday. She's also a correspondent and anchor with the CBS Sports Network. And Jason Gay is the sports columnist at the Wall Street Journal. I want to start out with a poll that CBS just took of sports fans who would win. And on the matchup, more football fans want to see the Los Angeles Rams, 47%, win versus the Patriots, just 27%. Jason, can we call the Patriots the underdog?
No. They're the Death Star. You know, Bill Belichick is Darth Vader. I mean, this is basically a Patriots entitlement at this point. 9 Super Bowls in the last 18 years. I have a 4-year-old at home. This is her 4th Patriots Super Bowl. So, of course, America is eager for change.
Eager for change.
Everybody outside of the Boston area. I
this is true. There are
That's
6 states up in the New England area that are very much vigorously rooting for another Patriots title.
Jarrett, I mean, we talk about the Patriots being here for the past 9 years, but it's been a very different path for the NFL. It looks like their ratings have actually been on the bounce back after some difficulty here.
Oh, no doubt.
Where's that enthusiasm coming from?
It's interesting because some of the issues that were there last season, and we've talked about the protests being one of them, actually some of the off-the-field issues that the NFL has dealt with, a lot of that quieted down this season, and the drama really revolved around officiating. And you can look at this season really from the start where they instituted a new helmet rule coming into this season. That caused a lot of concern and controversy, the roughing the quarterback penalties. And then, so it seems so fitting that in the NFC Championship game that and fitting, not like it's something that you wanted to have if you're the NFL, but for an officiating call to be the source of so much conversation after the game. And so we'll see if there's any kind of controversy in the Super Bowl. Typically, you don't have a lot. You've got some all-star crews, and they get graded, the officials that work the game. So typically, you don't have a lot of controversial calls in the Super Bowl. But this season has been really interesting for the NFL from that standpoint.
And Dana, Jarrett was touching on it there, but that non-call of pass interference, according to the poll that we took, because people were certainly talking about that and the use of instant replay. In general, 45% of football fans say instant replay should be used more often than it is now. 41% think it's being used the right amount already.
Well, I think nobody wants it to slow the game down. They don't want the game to be longer, but you want to get the call right. And I think it comes down to the judgment call. And unfortunately, it's the fans that are not the ones that are voting on this, but it's the competition committee. And they have to decide, do you want to be able to say, in a judgment call, we're going to allow replay? Are you going to allow a referee in New York to determine, you know what, there should have been a flag, so we're going to do it? And I know people have talked about this idea that maybe the coaches get in the final 2 minutes or throughout the game one flag they get to throw on a judgment call, because nobody wants the moment that we've had after this game. It's the Super Bowl, and we're still talking about, should the Saints be the ones that are here instead of the Rams?
Yeah, no question. This offseason will revolve on a lot of conversation about what to do with instant replay. It's actually been there, excuse me, for a number of years. On that play in New Orleans, for example, though, you could have called 2 penalties. So you could have had the judgment call of pass interference, but also it was a blatant helmet-to-helmet hit. So the question to the NFL, it's like, okay, you're going to institute this rule that says you take the head out of the game, and then we sit there and we watch that situation in New Orleans as we have throughout the season. I think that's something that they're going to really have to address. And really, when they brought the rule in last year with the helmet rule, that was one of the questions that the competition committee fielded right off the bat. If you're going to have this rule, helmet to helmet, and you're going to institute it, and it has these, definite penalties, you've got to be able to get that call right. So I think that's going to be something going into the offseason. Bill Belichick, the Patriots coach, has proposed twice over recent years that you could use instant replay for any type of call. And people...
They just haven't passed it yet, and that's the only thing. But don't you feel like, because now this is so in the forefront, that it's sort of back saying, look, you didn't want to do it before, but do you want this to be the outcome if you're not going to be willing to do it?
And I don't know if the question about the pace of the game is really going to be the answer to say we can't do it, because the NFL has shaved about 4 minutes in terms of the average pace, average time of the game over the past 4 years. So they have found ways, just in terms of how they administer game, to actually keep the pace of the game flowing. So now maybe you give up a little bit of something like that for replay.
Jason, I want to ask you, because we talked about it with the president, the issue and the political heat that came with his attention to how the anthem was handled. And linked to the causes that the players were kneeling around, specifically violence, police violence.
Sure.
And when we polled people, the country was really split evenly on whether they wanted this talked about or not.
Yeah.
But most Americans think that President Trump and the league and the team owners handled this inappropriately. 63% said President Trump handled it inappropriately. 66% said the league handled it inappropriately. I know they both like to move on from this, but is it possible to?
I mean, I don't think it's, at all a moot point as an issue. And as long as it's an issue, you're going to have continued dialogue and continued protest. Whether or not it'll take the form of kneeling before the anthem or during the anthem is another question. But I think it's delusional to suggest that somehow the president has stepped forward and solved this issue. In fact, in terms of the perk up for the NFL, for the ratings and things, I would lay it more at the feet of some of the more exciting games we had. There were a lot of terrific primetime contests during the season, and you had tremendous young talent like Patrick Mahomes, who won the MVP last night. This is electric, offensive-minded football.
Yeah.
I think it's really fun to watch, and it's even starkly different than last year. So I would say that that's probably most of the reason why we saw an uptick this year.
And when we polled people, they actually didn't have an upset with athletes having political positions.
Sure.
They were okay. There's room in football for politics, but it was how that protest was carried out that really split people.
One of the things that is interesting is that the NFL tried to institute a policy back last spring saying that, okay, there will be no protest during the anthem, and then that caused another problem in terms of the union pushing back on that. And then as the season got on, it was kind of like, okay, let's table this policy. We're not going to have a policy. And, oh, by the way, organically, the NFL's issue kind of quieted down a bit. Now, there's a big problem because Colin Kaepernick still doesn't have a job. So I think there are a lot of people that understand that, and you talk about the split in our country in terms of whether or not they're accepting of that. I mean, that's the real huge problem from one level. But in terms of the actual protests and whatnot, I think the NFL, by backing off on whether or not it would have a hardline policy, did itself a favor to kind of let the situation organically unfold.
But they also, with the players, a lot of them that you talk with, they wanted to move on also from the protests. They wanted to get to the issues and show people what they are doing forward. And I know we did some stuff with some of the Players Coalition, who they had a press conference here, and they were showing these different organizations that they're working with to make real change in their communities.
We got to leave it there. Thanks to all three of you. This was great to be here in Atlanta. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. We hope you stay with CBS all day through a special late show with Stephen Colbert. I'm Margaret Brennan from Atlanta.